good afternoon. Here we are with the book club once more. And, it's a marvelous thought to realize that we started in 2001 and it is almost 2025. So we will be 24 years old next month. That's a pretty good age, I think. We've had such a huge variety of books. We've had authors, we've discussed films. It's been a great journey. And I'm so happy to say that it's an ongoing journey. Now, today we have Sanjay Saxena, who's chosen a book which I think most people would not be familiar with, and therefore a terrific choice. Today we will all get to know Orlando. Now, when you think of Virginia Woolf, it's usually Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, maybe Waves, A Room of Her Own, but hardly ever Orlando. So, Sanjay, looking forward to hearing about Orlando.
Thanks, Moini. Thank you, and good evening, everybody. So what we have done is that we have structured it in such a way that we talk about Virginia Woolf, the author, and we talk about the book, and we talk about the the special relationship between Virginia Woolf and her friend Vita Sackville West that inspired this book. So that's how the presentation is structured, and I hope you enjoy it. Let us start.
Okay, Sanjay, carry on.
Oh,
No, can we have the next slide, please?
Yes.
So, Virginia Woolf, a modern feminist writer. What is meant by modern? Modern, somebody who's not classical. What's the difference between classical and modern? My daughter, who did literature at Delhi University, tells me that the classical writers wrote in a stable, structured world, whereas modernist fiction is that which pertains to uh, an uncertain environment where an individual is not sure of what his environment. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been told. So feminism is what she is best known for, and she pioneered the stream of consciousness writing. Now, there again, I'm not sure if this is correct because, to my mind, Dostoevsky was probably the first one to get into stream of consciousness writing. But because this term had not been coined in his time, I think it's only in 1890 that there was a psychologist by the name of William James, I think, who came up with this term. So in any case, the point that's being made is that Virginia Woolf was not one of your traditional writers at the turn of the last century. She was born in 1882 in an upper-class London family. Her father was a writer, mother an artist, and was a blended family in the sense that this was a second marriage for both her parents. So consequently, Virginia Woolf had a number of siblings. Her great-grandmother, it seems, was a Bengali lady from Chandanagar. And this, I came across this information in the Hindu supplement, where there was an interview with William Dalrymple. And Dalrymple, it turns out, is great nephew of Virginia Woolf. And he has said that Virginia's maternal grandmother was an Anglo-Indian lady, and her great-great-grandmother was a Bengali lady. And according to Dalrymple, Virginia Woolf does have Bengali traces in her face, whatever you make of that. So she grew up in a literary environment, and there would be this group of people that her father would call over every week, and they were generally educated people of very liberal, open views of leftist persuasion. So that was the first introduction to the intellectual currents of the age. She was homeschooled in English literature classics till the age of 15. She married a university friend of her brother. Her brother was at Cambridge University. And Leonard Woolf, her husband, was a non practicing Jew and is an author, publisher, civil servant. And there appears to have been very little physical intimacy in their marriage, and because he too was given to homosexual relationships like his wife. So they launched the Hogarth Press, which published most of Virginia's novels, and this was launched in their house. It was quite an adventure starting that enterprise. Okay, next slide, please. So she suffered from episodes of mental breakdown during her life, and she attempted suicide more than once. Now, first, she lost her mother when she was only 13 years old, uh, and uh, and a few years later, she lost her father as well. And so her first nervous breakdown was sometime in the mid 90s, and then she suffered from sexual abuse at the hands of her half brother, who was looking after the family after her parents had died. And the other thing about her life is that, of course, very prominent aspect of her life is the close relationship with Vita Sackville West, who was her. They had a passionate affair for 3 years, but and remained friends throughout. So Orlando is a book that is inspired by and is a tribute to the relationship between the two women, which is why this is the reason that I chose to focus on it, because it is original in that there is no other book quite like this, I feel. In any case, let's move on. So about Vita Sackville West, we need to know something about her to understand Orlando. So she was a poet, I think the 12 or 13 collections of poetry, and she's written some novels as well. She's a landscape designer from the English upper class. She was very much a part of the aristocracy. And next slide, please. And so Sackville West was, Vita was not the only person with whom Virginia Woolf was involved, and she was quite open about her sexual preferences. She was a passionate advocate for gender equality, especially in higher education, because till 1948, the women were not granted degree by Cambridge. You could study, but you wouldn't get a degree. And that I understand changed in 1948. She committed suicide by drowning in 1941. Why did she commit suicide? Because she was prone to depression. We've seen that she tried committing suicide earlier as well. And uh, and the suicide note that she left behind for her husband is deeply moving, and it shows uh, the depth of love that was there between them, in spite of sex being no part of the relationship. Okay, so that is a brief biography of Virginia Woolf. Now we come to Virginia Woolf, the writer, the kind of person as a writer. With the, like I said, the weekly get together at her father's friends, there were literally people of mark, chiefly of radical persuasion. This is in inverted commas. That's what she writes in her diary. Now, the easy thing about doing research on Virginia Woolf is that there's a lot of documentation. She's done a lot of letter writing, and she maintained a brutally honest and a very detailed diary throughout her life. Letters, I mean, hundreds of letters, literally hundreds of letters between her and Vita Sackville West. So, plus the people they were interacting with, they were all the letter writing types. Everybody was forever writing letters to everybody else. Yeah. So, material on her is aplenty. S- So she writes in her diary that she was the people who visited her father were literally people of mob, chiefly of radical persuasion. And of course, her brother was at Cambridge, and she would interact with his friends who came down. And part of the was part of the Bloomsbury group, which is a bunch of bohemian artists, writers, creative people. John Maynard Keynes, the economist, and his ballerina wife was part of it too. Yeah, and There were some politicians as well in it. So feminist streak and her essay "A Room of One's Own" is so she was mainly active in the interwar years, and her novels came out in the 1920s. That was the most productive period for her, and including Orlando, which came out in 1928. So a lot of nonfiction, over 500 essays, and A Room of One's Own is a major feminist document, and it makes a very strong argument why women need to be financially independent, and there can't be any real gender parity unless there is financial independence of women. I think that's very true. And she's a very keen observation, a very observant person. There's this essay that's quite famous that she's written on a moth trapped in a window frame. I mean, you would imagine that there won't be very much to say on such a subject, but she has written a fine essay on that. Also, I think she was good at detailed descriptions of trivia. There's something she's written on Oxford Street where she describes hats and bags and things like that in very great detail without boring you to tears. That's the important part. One aspect of her personality and her writing is that she rejects the man woman binary and she subscribed to a sexual fluidity. Okay, so which means that in her perception, there are aspects of masculinity in women and those of femininity in men. And there's a quote from her: in every human being, vacillation from one sex to the other takes place. So that is, of course, remember, she is writing 100 years ago when these things were really they were not really discussed openly.
Excuse me. Would everyone please make sure their mics are muted so that we hear the speaker only?
Yeah, so she has influenced modern writers like Margaret Atwood and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And so that is Virginia Woolf, the writer. And may I have the next slide, please? You know? Yes. Now, Orlando, a biography. Now, about the book, this book I said was published in 1928, Stream of Consciousness, writing an expression of Woolf's love for Vita Sackville West. So it's a tribute to her actually, and she writes in her diary a biography beginning in the year 1500 and continuing to the present day called Orlando, Vita only with a change about from one sex to the other. So the book is about Vita Sackville West. And it's a story that goes on for 300 years, 1500 to 1928, 1588 to 1928. So we also have Nigel Nicholson, who's Vita Sackville West's son, who describes the novel Orlando as the longest and most charming love letter in literature. Okay, so now more about the book. Next slide, please. Then we have uh, Virginia Woolf herself treated the book as a joke, calling it a highbrow lark, a very pleasant trifle. At another place in her diary, she writes, "It is all a joke, and yet gay and quick reading, I think, a writer's holiday." So the point is that Orlando is not typical of her work. She was a serious writer, and this a literary prank should not be taken to represent her wider body of work, which is why it's also more interesting because it's very different from all the other stuff that she's written. So the book did reasonably well, selling 8,000 copies in the first 6 months, more than double of what earlier works had accomplished. And now this is about the relationship between these two ladies, Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville West. Vita Sackville West is part of her aristocracy. In fact, she's related to Camilla Parker Jones, who's presently Prince Charles' wife, and she's really top of the line, shall we say. So Virginia Woolf was always open about her sexual preferences, and she had several relationships with women, and she had no interest in men, as a matter of fact. Um, she was 10 years younger to Vita Sackville West was 10 years younger to Virginia Woolf, and they met for the first time in 1922 when Virginia was about 40 years old. So Virginia was about 40 years old, and Vita Sackville West was 30 years old, being 10 years younger. The point that's being made is that we're not looking at some teenage schoolgirl sort of a thing. What we have here is a serious relationship between two mature adults. Yeah. Now, Vita Sackville West also maintained a diary, and in her diary, she has recorded, and I quote, Virginia Woolf dislikes the possessiveness and the love of domination in men. In fact, she dislikes the quality of masculinity. She says that women stimulate her imagination by their grace and their art of life. Now, this is a statement with which you might agree, you might disagree. I personally feel that love of domination is not the exclusive monopoly of one gender. And women can be as dominant as men, depending on the situation, frankly. And imagination and grace and the art of life. So, what we're seeing here is that Virginia Woolf sees men and women differently. They, for her, feminism is not about being same as men. It's being equal to men, but not same as men. There's a fine distinction there. Yeah. So as we've seen earlier, Vita Sackville West was also a bit of an author. She wrote novels and collections of poetry. And she was, of course, very rich. She had sprawling estate. Her estate is it's called Knoll, Knole. It is in Kent, and now, of course, it's been acquired by the government. It's about an hour and a half from London, but 40, 50 miles. And it's about 1,000 acres of land, and the castle itself is has 52 stairways and 300 rooms and is built over has a carpet area of 4.6 acres. So we're looking at serious money here. Now she was married to Vita Sackville West was married. They remained friends all their lives, but the intensity was only for about 3 years. Now, then we come to the main story of Orlando. Now, let's just go quickly over the synopsis there. Next slide, please. So Orlando is this rich, handsome, aristocratic teenager in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, who's quite fond of him. So his days spent in riding and hunting and doing other things that people in those places do. And he's writes poetry at night, so he has literary ambitions. He writes poetry at night. In fact, he's quite a prolific writer, as we'll find out. Then we come to 1607 when there is a great frost. The river Thames freezes and is converted into a pleasure ground.
Sanjay,
The carnival
your voice
atmosphere.
is breaking up a
It
bit.
was at one evening that Orlando meets.
Sanjay, your voice is dipping and breaking up. Can you bit?
What do you suggest?
Just be a little louder.
What do you suggest I do? Is it something to do with my
No,
connection?
no, no.
No, see, that's better now.
Okay,
Right now it's okay. You just spoke. It came through. Okay, so just be closer to the mic. I think that's it.
That's all that's required.
okay, great. So I was worried it might be my network, which is not very dependable, as you know. But in any case, so we have this great frost of 1607, where the river is frozen and the river is being used for organizing carnivals, and there's a gay atmosphere in the evening. It also enabled the merchants and the farmers to make some money because frost was a frequent problem in UK back then, and they didn't quite, and it caused a lot of loss to the farmers. So these fairs were organized to enable them to make some money by selling whatever they could. So at one such, so Orlando meets Sasha at this carnival and falls in love with her in spite of his engagement to a lady from English aristocracy. And this, of course, is not viewed very well in the court. And in due course, the Russian princess betrays Orlando and they part on rather unpleasant terms. She goes back to Russia with a with a Russian sailor who happened to be in England. Yeah, so that doesn't work out. So after that, Orlando returns to his estate. The next slide, please. Orlando returns to his estate in the country and decides to write a poem that will make him immortal. And so he begins writing a poem titled The Oak Tree, right? And we are told that Orlando is a prolific writer, having completed 47 works by the age of 25. Yeah. And but without very great success, shall we say. So he reaches out to one Mr. Green, who is a bit of a critic and who's a cynic who believes poetry is dead in England and Shakespeare and Marlowe write only for money, and he holds that true poetry died with Greeks. Now, Green is Orlando feels that Green could help him with his poem and guide him in completing the oak tree, which he felt would be his ticket to immortality. So that's how he reaches out to Nicholas Green. Now, Green turns out to be a grubby character. He accepts money and hospitality from Orlando and then goes on to lampoon him and one of his plays publicly in an article titled Visit to a Nobleman in the Country. That he makes fun of Orlando, and Orlando is, of course, furious. And he decides to burn everything that he's written. So all his works are thrown into the fire except for the oak tree, which he decides to preserve. Now, at the same time, Orlando is being pursued by. Next slide, please. Orlando is being pursued by Archduchess Harriet, who has a romantic interest in Orlando, an interest that Orlando does not reciprocate. Now we will find out subsequently more about this Harriet. Yes. Next slide, please. So next we have we have King Charles appointing Orlando as ambassador to Constantinople. Now it was interesting to come across the word Constantinople. Nowadays nobody uses that word anymore. But maybe if you were writing in 1920s, you still could get away with it. The choice of Constantinople is significant as Constantinople, founded by the Greeks and ruled by Romans, Byzantines, Christians, and Muslims, was a city of shifting identities. And shifting identities is something which is central to to the story of Orlando. So, so this is why Constantinople was chosen for the story. Now, Orlando quite enjoys his life there. He discharges his duty well. He's popular and he takes to the Turkish way of life, and he enjoys all the luxuries that persons in high offices um, get in Oriental societies of those times. So then there's a bit of a celebration in Constantinople and with fireworks and all, and after which Orlando falls into a deep sleep. Okay, and he goes on sleeping for 7 days and 7 nights, and when he wakes up after 7 days, he finds that he has changed into a woman. Now, how that happened, why that happened, is not explained, and not much time is spent by Virginia Woolf on dramatizing this. It's stated very plainly that just he just woke up as a woman. So at the age of 30, Orlando has become Lady Orlando. He realizes he's the same person with the same intellect and personality, but a woman. And he quite adjusts quite easily to the changed gender and feels being a woman is preferable. Uh, in in one place, Virginia Woolf is saying that he's the same person with the same intellect and personality, but a woman. That means it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Next sentence, she says, she he feels being a woman is preferable, thereby indicating that men and women are different and then that one is to be preferred to other. So there is this conflict throughout. There are times when she feels that they're equal, and the times when they feel they're different. Yes. Next slide, please. So here, this is
Speak a bit louder, Sanjay.
oh, sorry. So this is the quote that I have from her. Better it is to leave the rule and discipline of the world to others. Better to be quit of martial ambition, the love of power, and all other manly desires. If one can more fully enjoy the most exalted raptures known to the human spirit, contemplation, solitude, love. So this would seem to suggest that contemplation, solitude, and love are the domain of women, and ambition and disciplining the world is the work of men. Now, again, I probably it's remember we're talking of a book written 100 years ago. A lot has changed since then. So then there's some unrest in Constantinople, and Orlando escapes the city with a group of Romani nomads. Initially, they get along well with each other, but soon they realize that there are fundamental differences between them and Orlando. And these differences pertain to how they view nature. Orlando, or Lady Orlando now, has the English person's love for nature. For them, nature is a source of beauty, a source of it encourages contemplation, and generally they're positively disposed towards nature. Whereas the nomads view Roman as something really quite hostile, because they have to face the wrath of nature. If there's a storm or if there's excessive snowfall, they have to bear the brunt of it. So there were differences between them. And with Lady Orlando manages to escape that group of Romani nomads, and finds herself on a merchant ship back to London. Now, on the ship, next slide, please. On the ship, Lady Orlando becomes aware of the power of women when the meager glimpse of her ankles causes a sailor to almost fall to his death. So again, we are told that men and women are different, and women can have impact that men don't have in the same way. So, Lady Orlando now returns to England to find the ownership of properties is under litigation. She is, remember, it was only in, I think, I'm not sure, but it was only in the 40s that women were allowed to inherit property in England. Prior to that, they were not allowed to, especially ancestral property. So, she's allowed to reside in her properties till the matter is settled. So, she begins to dress alternatively as a man and a woman. And then next slide, please. We have the Archduchess Harriet, whom we'd seen earlier, shows up again. It turns out Archduchess is actually a man disguised as a woman, who had disguised himself as a woman to get close to Orlando, who was a man. So it's all rather convoluted, but the idea that sexual identities are fluid, so she manages to, Lady Orlando manages to evade his marriage proposal with great difficulty. So the popular stereotype of gender and sexuality is being called into question. And next slide, please. So she visits London and takes to society in a big way, and she meets many highly regarded literary personalities: Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, Joseph Addison, and she quite enjoys herself. But she finds that they turn out to be ordinary men with the usual weaknesses. And again, I quote: rank was not distasteful to them, praise was delightful, and a piece of gossip did not come amiss. When I read this sentence, I was struck by the sheer brilliance of it. This is a statement that can be made of any people, anywhere, at any point of time. It's true of all of us, perhaps. Rank was not distasteful to them, praise was delightful, and a piece of gossip did not come amiss. Oh, I think a truer line was never written. Okay, so one day Lady Orlando dresses up as a woman and accompanies a sex worker to her apartment, where she meets other women of that genre, and she finds that she quite enjoys the company of women. This we've seen earlier also, and this is something that has been confirmed by Vita Sackville West's diary as well, that she really liked the company of women. Next slide, please, Runa. So the story moves to the 19th century, and don't look for one shouldn't look for logic or any kind of order in the plot. It is really quite arbitrary. So the story moves to the 19th century, and Lady Orlando feels the need to get married. So she gets engaged to a gentleman called Marmaduke Shelmodine within minutes of meeting him. And I wondered how did she come up with a name like that? Who on earth is called Marmaduke? You know, maybe it was something that happened then. So he's a sea captain who's also gender non-conforming, and they subsequently marry at her mansion without any vows that require obedience. So the story is, we move on. Next slide, please. So the legal matters are sorted out, and Lady Orlando is becomes the owner of her estate, and she's legally declared a woman. So she gets several invitations to social gatherings. She's quite popular, but she prefers to spend time with her husband. And she discovers in Marmaduke elements of femininity. And again, I quote, he could be as strange and subtle as a woman. I think that was, again, a very deep sentence. And she quite likes him for it because of the feminine side of his personality. Then, next slide, please. Then we find ourselves in the 20th century. Now, Lady Orlando takes a train to London, and she's where the whole modernity hits her. She finds that London is full of automobiles, traffic, crowded pavements, and shops full of all kinds of goods. Clearly, a lot has changed. So she meets Nicholas Green again. Nicholas Green, remember, is the critic whom she had whom Orlando had approached to help him guide with his manuscript. Uh, now, Nicholas Green has also survived the centuries, just like Orlando. Uh, he Nicholas Green promises to get the Oak Tree published and takes the manuscript with him. He now holds Shakespeare and Marlowe in high regard and rubbishes contemporary poets. So this is how critics are. Virginia Woolf is telling us critics are too hidebound and attached to literary tradition to appreciate anything that is new. Probably it was true then, it's probably still true now. Yeah. Next slide, please. And Orlando is particularly surprised to see a modern bookshop because hitherto we'd seen only manuscripts and folios and folders of various kinds. The neatly arranged, well-bound books on shelves was a novel experience. Electric lamps on London streets and elevators in buildings surprised Lady Orlando. And here again, the 1880 to 1940, the period of Virginia Woolf's life, saw a lot of technological and social change. I mean, you had electricity and automobile and aviation and radio and telephone and what have you. Yeah, I don't think there's any other 50-year period, 60-year period which has seen such fundamental changes. So we're moving towards the end of the story. Next slide, please. So Orlando goes into a department store, and her mind is assailed by thoughts from her past. Remember, she vacillates between the present and the past in a manner suggestive of mental anxiety. So she's having kind of a nervous breakdown or a panic attack, and her mind is flooded with stray thoughts from here and there from her past. The Oak Tree is finally published in October 28 and is a success, earning a lot of royalty for its author and going into 7 editions. The novel ends with Marmaduke Shelmardine, her husband, flying in a plane over Orlando's mansion. He jumps out of the plane, and that is where the story ends. So it's a story which is of course interesting, provided you don't expect the traditional format. Strange things are happening all the time, and And that's what really makes the story work, frankly. It's uh, there are, of course, there's very little dialogue in the book, so that makes parts of it are somewhat dreary to read. But having said that, I really quite enjoyed reading this book, and mainly because I don't know of any other book quite like this. At least in my limited reading, I've not come across another such book. So then, next slide, please. We look at some of the similarities between Orlando and Vita Sackville West. Now, they both lived in sprawling estates in the country, and ownership of a property was a issue for Vita, and the difficulties faced by Orlando reflect that. A real life affair with Violet Trefusis is the inspiration for Orlando's affair with Sasha. It's And then there are some other similarities. Next slide, please. So Vita had lived in and returned from Persia, where her husband was posted as a diplomat. And in the book, we have Orlando as an ambassador to Constantinople and his subsequent return to England. Orlando's literary ambitions mirror those of Vita, and Orlando's involvement with the gypsies is taken from the Sackville West family saga. It seems Vita's grandfather had a mistress who was a Spanish gypsy. So it is like we are told earlier, as Virginia Woolf has herself said, it's just Vita story with a different name. And finally, a postscript. Next slide, please. So we have a strange mixture of about Virginia Woolf. This is a strange mixture of progressive views and social prejudices. She's a feminist, gender equality, higher education for women, anti-colonial, anti-war. Yes, but not entirely free from regressive thinking. So there's this diary entry that she's made in 1920 which says the fact is lower classes are detestable. Yes, Jews are greasy, Germans akin to vermin, and Negroes and negresses looking like chimpanzees. Now you could the fact that you could get away with all this, it tells you how much times have changed. Yeah, I mean, you would get lynched for saying these things now, but at that time there was not even a ripple. But the central idea that I was left this line stuck with me that she's used, the idea that men are fundamentally different, but by no means superior from women. The man looks the world full in the face as if it was made for his uses and fashioned to his liking. The woman takes a sidelong glance at it, full of subtlety, even suspicion. I thought that was a sharp observation. Yeah. So that's where the presentation comes to an end. I hope uh, you liked it, and we can have a discussion now.
Yeah, so Sanjay, thank you so much. Um, I just wonder how many of the people present today um, had not read the book. Please unmute. Hey, everyone, please unmute. We're all open for a discussion.
No, I have never read this book. I've read
Okay.
others by.
Luna,
Uh,
Uma, Satish.
Okay, so
Uh,
I'm the only one who's read it, it seems.
so, Ginny, have you read it?
I read it years ago. And
Okay.
when I read all my Virginia Woolf, I had a thing about Virginia Woolf, and I was sort of confused by it. And when I reread it this time, somehow it made more sense the way our society has developed. She was really a forward thinker.
Very, very. Now, I was just thinking about Oscar Wilde and all the commotion that came out of the discovery that he was gay. And how come Virginia Woolf, Sanjay, you said she practiced her lesbianism openly. She made no secret of it.
None whatsoever. But the law in England that time was homosexuality was a crime.
Hmm.
Man-man relationship was not acceptable, but
Yeah,
there was nothing in the law to
yes, for
prohibit a
women.
woman-woman
Correct.
relationship, maybe because they never conceived it possible.
They never thought of it.
Okay,
But if they discovered it
yeah.
happening, I would
Yes,
have thought they'd be even more shocked.
No, 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 no. No, no, because Victorian England, Mohini,
Hmm,
Victorian England thought women didn't have sex. I mean, they were sexless
I
virtually.
know. But then they
So,
discover these two women um
but
having a sexual relationship. How would they react to
I
it?
mean, no, they know that
I
they're
thought,
together, but it's not. It's not.
I see. It doesn't strike them. It
No,
doesn't
no, it
strike
may
them that
strike them even,
sex
but it's
is part of
acceptable
it.
because I think it's partly because they think women are lesser or inferior people or wo kuch bhi kar sakte hain, that kind of attitude. Possibly, who knows? I mean,
Hmm.
it's not considered sex, if you get what I mean.
No, I do get what you mean. My goodness, staggering to think of it, really.
Yeah.
What
But
women
Um,
do is inconsequential.
Mhm.
yes,
yeah,
also, yes, it's
yeah,
inconsequential.
inconsequential.
Mhm.
But what Runa said, that women were considered to be asexual. I mean, I remember that movie, Great Balls of Fire, about Jerry Lee Lewis. In the mid 20th century, for God's sake, Jerry Lee Lewis accuses his very young wife of moving, that is participating
Mhm.
during sex. And he doesn't like it. Not
Hmm.
supposed to be like that.
Many of
A
them.
woman is supposed to lie, just lie,
Hmm.
doing nothing.
Yeah,
So, well, okay.
but
Okay.
at the
Now,
same time, Moini, at the
hmm,
same time,
yes.
we had Lady Chatterley's lover. Yeah,
Hmm.
that women were not entirely uh, immune to having fun, shall we
But
say,
that was later.
No,
later.
Lawrence
I
is
think
later.
everything existed. It depended on the individual person, how prudish he was, how he was brought up, and what his own ideas were, his or hers. I think it would matter that way because look, throughout the ages, you've had men and women who have had
Yeah.
affairs, who have been highly sexed, and it's all pretty much, I think, social conditioning and
Mhm.
again personal religious conditioning than anything
Mhm.
else.
But there is
Mhm.
always the perception of society, you know?
Mhm.
May
So
I say
it
something?
surprises me greatly. Anyway,
Mhm.
yes, other people who would like to weigh in?
I would
Yes,
like to say.
Vasudha, yes.
I think it was not such an open relationship. I had read a book about Vita Sackville West. I
Hmm.
Mhm.
think Harold Nicholson was also related to her, or
Yeah,
probably
Yes,
another
husband,
yes.
son of hers.
Was
husband,
She
related to her husband actually.
describes
Hmm.
they
husband.
went to great lengths, to hide the relationship, particularly Sackville West. So maybe this was known only in the circle of the Bloomsbury group. It was not such an open
Hmm.
relationship.
I
They
can believe
couldn't
that.
afford
That
to
makes
have
Yeah.
one.
sense. Yes. If
Yeah,
that
of
is
course.
so,
This was something
I
that
buy that. Hmm.
that
But
Bloomsbury group was particularly bohemian. That's not in doubt, but it was not all that secret. I mean, Vita Sackville West and one of her lovers, Violet, uh, actually eloped to France, and this husband subsequently came to pick them up, and they were living together for months in France. Both of them having run off from their homes. So perhaps it didn't get the publicity that it would get nowadays. Perhaps,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
and
Yes, I dare
probably
say.
probably
It was
the
also the sanction of their upper class background. A number
Mhm.
of its members were plain,
Mhm.
mad. For instance,
I
the
remember that.
Mitfords, and they were actually quite mad, and they had love for Hitler and fascism, and they were tolerated. So
Hmm.
that sanction also both these ladies enjoyed. That
I
Possibly,
think
possibly.
also
I mean,
a lesbian relationship does not threaten a man in the same way that a heterosexual relationship would. Also, if you notice, a marriage, a normal heterosexual, I mean, a marriage between a man and a woman, even if both of them were homosexuals, was very common in order to maintain
No.
social appearances.
Mhm.
I mean, if you read the whole story of Mom and the House of Doors, which we did recently, I mean, that comes out very clearly.
Mhm.
And I wanted to mention there's a very famous French authoress called Colette,
Yeah.
Hmm.
who would
Mhm.
have been around the same time. Now, she has a series of novels which she wrote about a girl from, I mean, grows up from a high school girl to a mature woman called Claudine, you know. And there are about 6 novels. And in that, Claudine gets married at a fairly early age to a man who's slightly older than her, who's very polished and urbane and man of the world, who has other lovers, and he encourages her because she's bisexual. She's attracted to women also, and he encourages her in those relationships. You know, so that sort of thing is also explored. I mean, it's not uncommon, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, okay. Right. So I wonder what you thought about other aspects of the novel. This is the one that leaps out at you, right? The very unusual attitude to gender, you know, the protagonist sort of fluidly moving from one gender to the other. I mean, one fine day Orlando wakes up and
Yes,
he
yes,
is a woman
exactly.
and
Yes,
nothing is made of it. I mean, it's
nothing is
just
made of it.
taken in your stride. So that is amazing, really amazing. There's no emphasis on it. There's no strangeness attached to it. So this, uh, what shall I say? Uh, Not obsession, but this primary concern of Virginia Woolf's about stating that binaries should not be the way we look at the two
Yes,
genders, right?
yes,
So this is, of
actually.
course, the prominent thing.
Yeah.
Any comment about the plot?
Hardly
Any
any
comment
problem.
about the timeline?
Yes, the timeline is huge.
What they
Suddenly.
call,
Yeah.
is that they call magical realism.
Today we
You
call
know,
it.
I wouldn't call it magical realism,
No.
but it is some form of fantasy. I
Ah,
find it a very self-indulgent novel where she has had a field day doing whatever she wants, not bothering about the standard rules of fiction,
mm.
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
She's
I
had
think
a
that
field day. Yeah.
I think that's a very
Um,
correct observation. That's a
so
very
it
sharp
ends up
observation.
as fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Now, Sanjay, I have this question.
Mm.
Okay, so Orlando lives through these centuries
Yes. Yes.
and she meets these poets. But
Sorry.
I didn't, the poets,
The poets. Yeah.
Pope and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Addison
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these famous writers.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't find any significant comment or judgment about those writers,
No,
other
there
than that
isn't.
personal one, that they're
No,
ordinary people like anyone else.
no, you're right. There is no observation, no comment
Isn't
on.
that surprising?
It is surprising. There are many things that are surprising here. Actually, one should not look for logic in a book like that, which she herself has described as a lark. It's just
Yes.
it's a fun trip. It's you know,
But when you include these writers, there should be some point to it. And I feel we're letting her get away scot free without evaluating them, without judging them, without saying anything about their
yeah,
place
that's
in
right.
the
There's no
tradition of
comment at
literature.
all. Plus,
No
minus,
comment.
positive, negative, nothing. There
So,
is
what
no
was the
comment.
point? I feel, what was the point including them?
No, the
No,
Point
she
point,
was
said
not to
that
go
there are
there.
Yes.
no absolutes. Okay,
Hmm.
yeah.
their status changes with time. This man Green found
Hmm.
Shakespeare very ordinary
Yeah.
first.
But then
When he
later,
comes back,
Yeah.
he and
yes.
Marlowe, well, they were great writers. So these are fancies, okay? So depending upon the time, well,
So they have survived those
No,
centuries.
I
So you
think
have to look at them with respect now. Agreed. Agreed there. But those Pope and Addison and whatnot,
I think because to the extent that Orlando had literary ambitions of his own, so you probably had to bung in a couple of literary figures that he could aspire to follow or whatever.
and by the way, I
But
was
it's
wondering,
rather thin.
the oak tree,
Yes.
I mean, does that have a real life parallel or not?
No, I don't think.
No, I
Maybe
don't
you
think so
like.
either.
Uh,
No.
maybe one of the poems of Vita Sackville West is called "The Oak Tree." I don't know. That's a possibility. I
Ah,
don't know
oh
that.
yes,
Yes,
correct,
because
correct, yeah.
that lady's published a certain amount of poetry,
Mm.
12 or 13 collections of poems. So
And now
maybe
look
it's
at
like that.
that.
Yeah,
She has published so many books and so much poetry,
uh,
but she's not heard of now at all.
no.
You know, Virginia Woolf's name is still
Yes,
big, but
yes.
Vita Sackville West, who has heard of?
No,
Not.
actually, she was more known more for her flighty scandals more than anything else. She was a socialite, and people were more interested in gossip about her rather than her literary talents, quite frankly.
Hmm, hmm.
And uh, and there is a lot of
Okay.
interesting gossip. If you read the Paris Review of those days, for instance, Vita Sackville West features very prominently there.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
she was like
Okay, okay.
Paris Hilton of our times or something like that, whatever.
Good analogy. Good analogy.
But
Monali, would you like to put on your camera? Can you, Monali? Okay, I know she has trouble with it always. It's okay. Yashodhara, would you like to speak up?
There she is.
Oh, here's Monali. Hey, Monali. Hi. Good to see you.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm well. Would you like to comment?
Yes, in fact, so there is this very famous novelist called Nicola Griffiths who wrote Ammonite in 1992. It was her debut novel, and it talks about this place called Grenston's planet, which is inhabited entirely by women. Now, why I'm talking about this is, of course, it talks about very short time span, whereas this one moves on for centuries. I mean, now, what purpose could that be? So, this is what I'm just guessing. So, no matter what time a person is in, probably Wolf is talking about the kind of resilience that a human being can have, whether he or she is a man or a woman. So overnight, Orlando undergoes a sex change, but then she now is ready to let go of her inheritance, but she does not let go of her talent. She makes some meaning out of it. Although she can't make much meaning out of a relationship, she does get her book published, and finally, of course, it goes through so many editions. So it shows
Seven.
how relationships may fail, but no matter what gender is in, if the human being remains consistent in his or her efforts, I think that person will still succeed.
Thank you. Yes, nicely interpreted. So one thing is for sure that Virginia Woolf is talking of human beings, not men and women. Yes, Ginny, you had your hand up.
I was going to just follow the other speakers, talk about she finds her identity as a poet. And this is really a novel about a search for identity. And she starts out with her affair with the Russian woman. She goes away from the circle of her circle in Constantinople. And then when she tries being a gypsy, she's searching for her identity there. She's sort of not sure who she is, except she was a poet. And she goes back to England, where she fits into high society in one way, but she rejects it. She talks about why she rejects it and why she rejects the literary heroes. But she's always looking for who she is. And I think it's
And then she mingles with those sex workers
yes, that's
also.
right. So I think it's a very sophisticated identity novel long before identity novels sort of became the rage.
Yes, true.
Paul Auster and Walt Walker Percy and those writers later on.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think,
indeed.
yeah, you can't
Yes,
argue with
search
that.
for
It is an
identity.
identity novel. I think you hit the nail on the head. It is an identity
Yes,
novel.
very much so.
More
Very
than
much
anything
so.
else, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Uma, you were talking about something earlier on. Would you like to continue?
Yes, I found this the way the novel progresses and the way in which it twists and turns in so many ways, I find that Virginia Woolf is just letting her mind go, ranting. And okay, yes, it is about somebody trying to find their identity and all. That's very good point. But generally, I don't think those writers, those famous people, Addison and all, really mattered in the story. In
They
her
didn't
in
matter.
her case, she just
Mhm.
mentioned them because she thought it's good to mention them and
Mhm.
keep a relation with her ambitions of
And
becoming a writer.
also, I thought it gives a timeline.
It gives a
You know,
timeline.
the
Yes.
days of Pope. Just lived through that age also.
But to me, it seems like a novel without really any direction.
Mhm.
It's just going. And she's saying whatever enters her head.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said self-indulgent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually.
She hasn't bothered to play by the rules.
And we are so used to rules that we
Yes, we're
cannot
so used to.
actually accept this kind of ranting.
No, but I take your point. There is a lot of self-indulgence, and she's dragging her lover Vita Sackville West through the centuries. That's what this whole
She's
exercise is
basing her
about.
story on
But
Sackville West.
but in all the ranting and all, there are some questions that she raises, which call for some reflection. For instance, is there are there elements of masculinity and femininity in all of us, and to what extent? And what is defined as masculinity, and what is defined as
Um,
femininity? I mean,
Actually,
there's
I
some
find
serious stuff there. It's not all
See,
fluff. Let me put it
I
this way.
find that most people, when they are young, say till they are about 25, 30, even 35, 40, they remain different sexes. Women behave like women and men behave like men. But once they mature, after say 45, 50, 55, the women take on more masculine characteristics and the men give up their this is I found in actual life, I mean in
Give
people
up
around me
the
in my own family, that the men mellow down
Mhm.
and the women become more like
more able
like
to manage things.
yeah, fighting fit. They want to dominate
Mhm.
and the men becomes they subside in their ambition and their
That
that
controlling
vehemence.
thing, that
Mm,
controlling streak.
Hey,
Mhm.
by
yes,
the way, psychologists say that at a young age, among children, it is girls who are always dominating.
Yes.
Mhm.
Later on, after puberty, they are made to sort of, you know,
Ah, they are made to.
out
Mhm.
by nature. They-
Social
they're
pressure.
dominating. And now she's saying that in maturity also, after 45, 50, they go back to their dominating nature. Hmm?
Okay. Yes,
Is that-
Runa.
See, I think this whole business of masculine characteristics and feminine characteristics as commonly accepted, masculine being a little aggressive, wanting to rule, wanting to dominate, all these things are actually social conditioning. They're personality traits. It has nothing much to do with biology. It has come up over the years because of social conditioning and how you expect men to behave on the
uh,
one hand and women to
but
behave
but
on the
but
other.
one point
Biologically,
may I
biologically, just one line, huh? Biologically, they say that masculinity and femininity is actually a spectrum, which is why you have some women who are so-called little more masculine and women and men who are a little more feminine. I mean,
Ephem.
we see it, isn't it? It
Mm,
is actually a spectrum.
of course.
So that's how it.
yes.
I mean, but I think a lot of this is conditioning, and I think I haven't read the book. Sounds very fascinating to me, but I think it's a no rules book because it is examining something which you cannot bracket. How else do you discuss this topic of identity? I mean, in a totally free manner, unless you have this structure at all.
Hmm.
But Runa, my point is this: that isn't the social conditioning rooted in biology?
No,
What?
No,
no,
no.
No, one second.
no.
One second.
No, but social
Gone
conditioning,
beyond
can it be the
biology.
same in all societies all over the world? Can
No,
it be the same?
no.
No.
Yes.
My point is this: that The
No,
Almighty,
sometimes it
for
isn't.
whatever reason, nature has programmed the female of the species to bear children. And the primary responsibility of taking care of the offspring is also that of the female. This is a biological thing. The problem with the human offspring is that the fellow takes a long time to become independent. So the first 10, 12, 13 years of his life, he's good for nothing. And by the time he gets his act together, four or five are all others are on the way. So given this, the logic of biology means that the best years of a girl's life, of a woman's life, are just spent in bringing up children. So till the contraceptive pill came along, and thanks to the doctor in Austria who worked on it and figured it out, I mean, the women really had no choice. They were just condemned by biology to just give birth to and bring up children. This was their fate. So when men were doing great things, they were discovering continents and they were building cathedrals in Florence, and when they were exploring the whole world and extending the frontiers of science and Isaac
Women were
Newton and
busy
all that,
bearing children
women were
and
just
looking
bringing up
after them.
children. So
Sanjay,
to that extent.
Sanjay, this is what we talk of the past.
Exactly.
And the world changes, the persons changes, the human being changes, and that change has come across. And you would have seen it from over the last 50 years of our lives. We have seen how the change has come through, and this, I think, is what is evolution that is going on. That where we respect a woman to be as equal as you are,
To
is
be
something
more than just the bearer of
just a
children.
better.
Yes,
This
precisely.
is
But
something has come through.
no,
It
no,
takes,
Satish, this
Sanjay,
this
it takes
will
time
no
to come down.
only when women are allowed to flourish. If they are forever condemned to raising children, how will you know how good they are at math or
It's
science
social
or
conditioning, na? Why do you expect them to have children?
And
Social
why do you
conditioning,
expect?
na?
Why do you expect only
no?
the
That's
ladies to?
Because
rather
because
revolutionary. Huh?
I
this
remember.
is the nature's way. Nature has programmed them to have children.
No, so
Since
Okay,
that's
time
okay.
immemorial,
that's
men are
okay.
not
That
capable of
doesn't mean
having
you.
children.
I mean, look,
They can
Sanjay.
have children,
Any human
but they don't
being,
have to be the sole
yeah,
lookers after of
after.
those
No,
children.
not
Yes,
just that.
May I
Not just.
say something here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Please.
please.
Okay.
I was
Um,
waiting for you, Yashodhara.
Sorry. One point I think, in my view, we are missing is this is a very, we're talking about a very Western concept. While all of this, women bearing children, the aristocracy living a particular way, whatever was happening in the Indian subcontinent, the Asian subcontinent was very different before colonization. Uh, we had women, and yes, biologically, wherever you go, the female, bears children and blah blah. But we've had women scholars, we've had women warriors. Uh, the Eastern society somehow, I think, had a way of figuring it out. Uh, and yes, within our culture, even before colonization, there was the caste system, and corruption happened. But there was a system that worked and allowed women to flourish per se. That was about the whole gender thing that was going on, and I think it's a rabbit hole, never-ending rabbit hole.
Yes, yes,
But bringing
Yashodhara,
it,
it's
yeah.
changing. It's changing. I'm talking
Uh,
about even in India, and particularly the lower caste there. Yes, you hear stories of women
uh,
getting beaten up, etc. But when you look at the household, down in anywhere in say the lower income people, you'll find that the woman is quietly there beside it, and she is taking the answers. More remember that looking for houses in Baroda,
Baroda. Hmm.
lady would be inside just standing at the door and saying things, that the fellow would nod and say, repeat that.
No, I completely agree. I think that's my biggest argument with the neo-feminist movement, that the speakers of this feminism are in a minority. All the women on the screen here right now do not represent, for instance, the Indian women. We are maybe 10% uh, of the representation of the 10% of the population. The rural India, we have no idea what they live like.
correct.
And in a very paradoxical way, those women are more empowered. They have uh, yes, they have to.
Maybe.
They live within the confines of the conditioning and the societal norms, but within those confines, they're very apart. They're doing their work. They're earning their money. But again, like I said, it's a unending rabbit hole. The point that I really wanted to make was I'd read the novel years ago, and now I listen to it on Audible. And besides the absolutely whimsical narration and the plot going here and there, I'm always amazed by the beauty of her writing. The reason the for me the
He's
reason
changing the
the
topic.
I am, because I do think this is a very this
Go ahead,
is
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
as far as the novel goes, for
And
me that was really important.
you'll always have Satish giving you a little pinch.
So it is sort of poetic writing, you know.
It is absolutely delightful. The satire, the way she comments on the society, the aristocracy. There are references to these meetings at this one lady's house where all the intelligentsia meet, and only one intelligent thing is said in 30 years or 80 years or something, and the hangover of that lasts them for so many years, and therefore nothing else intelligent can be said in between. And somebody lands up saying something, and that's the end of that society. They can't meet again because the whole thing is broken now. I thought that was like
So funny.
delightfully
Yeah.
wicked. And the writing is just beautiful. I think for me, that is what that was what made sense to me. There are things like, I'm just reading it out. Something about poetry she said, like isn't poetry, isn't I can't find it. Isn't poetry a dialogue with oneself or something? I'm very badly paraphrasing.
It's there in this book. It's there in Orlando.
Yeah, lovely. There are the quotes. If you can go through the quotes itself, it's delightful. So for me, the book was in the beauty of the writing. I mean, for that, I mean, the meandering and I think Sanjay said we cannot question how she changes, why she changes,
Yes.
the how is she alive for 300 years, and then the man is changing into her suitors changing from a woman to a man and all of that, no questions, but the writing just kind of hypnotizes you, at
Like
least it did me.
Yes. Yes.
Did anyone at all feel a sense of boredom, loss of purpose, etc.? Because I did, huh? I mean, there were times when this meandering seemed a little, I mean, I thought I needed to be shepherded along some route. I needed to feel that I was going somewhere. And I lost that feeling. I did.
Mhm.
I just wondered if anyone else did.
Yeah, well,
I did
it's
find
not the
it
most
quite.
lucid book written. I can tell you that. It's not the most, I've read more lucid books. Let me put it this way.
More what?
Lucid.
Lucid. Okay.
Yeah.
I
So,
found it a
One
little
minute, Ginny,
delirious.
you're being very quiet. Let's have Ginny to say. What do you say of this?
Well, I agree entirely about the language. I think the wit of the observations of society and the language is so beautiful. I just wanted to echo that.
No, we're talking something else also.
Mhm.
About men
About
and
the,
women.
about the purpose. Well, I just let her take me along. You know, I just was so charmed by her language.
Yeah, you
and
surrendered to her.
I surrendered to her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, Gautam, you have not said anything. How come?
Well, there are. One is I just felt that she's very cleverly combined two essays, one on gender fluidity and the other one is societal changes over the next 200-300 years. And she just combined those two essays into a novel. As simple as that. It's very strangely, I felt that from the very beginning, when Sanjay started off, I don't know why, but and there's no logic to it. I just thought of Midsummer's Night's Dream as a fantastic or a fantasy or kind
Fantasy.
of thing. And the
Where
last thing
crazy
is
things happen
yeah,
and you're not to ask why.
And I reject Sanjay's assertion that the fundamental changes have not occurred in the last 60 years. He said it occurred during her period only of Virginia's. And the last thing is that anybody's name who's Marmaduke should jump from the plane.
This is so crazy. I mean, deliberately,
Yeah.
saying whatever, what the
I wonder
hell,
what happened to the
Yeah.
plane? It just went on flying away.
We're not told about that.
You're not to
We are
us,
not told.
Uma.
He could have fallen. Yeah. What
Oh,
happened to
how
the plane? I
logical
was
you're
curious.
being. Good God. Where's your logic? I mean, you're not supposed to carry your logic to Virginia Woolf.
Delirious. She's totally delirious.
Just Srinivasan, would you like to join the debate? Bye, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sanjay, more than anyone else. And
All
thank
the
you.
very